Welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast featuring Neil Smith, President General Manager of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and longtime ESPN NHL veteran Vic Morren. Together, they share no-nonsense opinions on news and issues around the National Hockey League. Whether you're a casual or diehard fan, each episode of NHL Wraparound will leave you more informed. Now, here's your hosts, Neil and Vic.
Welcome to NHL Wraparound Stanley Cup Final Preview. Vic Morren, along with my partner Neil Smith, and shortly we will be joined once again by TSN's Craig Button to break it all down. It is going to be a loaded show, but first, what did you do with yourself the entire weekend with no hockey?
Yard work, more yard work. Deck, pressure washing, mulch, carrying, just all yard work in spring.
I want you to lie here. Did you miss me?
I did. I was wishing you were there with me to carry the mulch.
No, well, it rained up in the Northeast on Saturday, but we got the dog out for a nice hike yesterday and watched a couple of documentaries and just chilled. And now I think we're gearing ourselves up for the final. And that's our segue into three things you need to pay attention to, brought to you by UBS Financial Services, Inc. Number one, the Stanley Cup Finals open on Wednesday. And similar to last year, the Panthers with 6 days off, the Oilers with 5 days off in between their conference finals series and the final. In game one, the Panthers will tie the Dallas Stars from 98 to 2000 and Detroit from 07 to 09 for the most games played in a 3-year span in league history, 308. And they will, of course, break that mark in game two on Friday. Sam Reinhart, Gustav Forsling have played in 303 of those games. So what I want to pose to you here is it's a lot of hockey, but it's not the New York Islanders from 80 through 84 where they made 5 consecutive finals. And I think with the amount of days off that they have had heading into this final, certainly there's plenty in the tank for Florida entering this final.
Absolutely. And plenty of emotion, plenty of drive. And the league is giving both teams a lot of time to get their players as healthy as they possibly can. So I don't think you're going to see any wear and tear on these guys when this series starts.
Number two, just saying. And both of us have a couple of interesting stats here. I'm going to start with the goaltenders. Sergei Bobrovsky in the postseason for Florida, 12-3, 2.11 goals against average, .912 save percentage, and 3 shutouts. But Stu Skinner, since the second game against the LA Kings, and this actually includes the Game 3 loss to Vegas in the second round, he is 6-2, 1.73 goals against average, .931 save percentage, and also 3 shutouts. So, do we see the tables balancing out a little bit? Because we're going to take this up with Craig Button later on as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing. Stuart Skinner did it last year for the Oilers, got them right through to Game 7. Can he do it again this year? I mean, we all have a lot of faith in Bobrovsky, but Stuart Skinner, not so much. But I don't know. Why not?
Yes, why not? And I'll certainly be looking for your email or text should Skinner prevail, and me having some faith in him all along.
Well, listen to this one.
All right.
Sasha Barkov, captain of the Florida Panthers, since the start of the 2024 playoffs, that's last year's playoffs, Barkov has only been on the ice for 4 even strength goals against, excluding empty net goals, but 4 in those 41 games. That's remarkable. He's only been scored when he's on the ice, which would be the minus, right? He's only got 4 minuses, of course, tons of pluses. But that's a remarkable number. Just goes to show how disciplined he is in his game.
And so worthy of being nominated once again for the Selke Trophy as best defensive forward.
Yes. And also Sam Reinhart, we should add, is also up for the Selke Trophy as well.
Correct. Number 3, let's talk about the Sandpaper Seniors playing for the respective clubs. Corey Perry, Brad Marchand. Perry won the Stanley Cup in his second season with Anaheim, 2007. This is his 5th final of the decade already, but he has lost his previous 4 with Dallas in 2020, Montreal in 21, Tampa in 22, and of course the Oilers last year. Marchand won the Cup technically as a rookie in 2011 and has lost the final in 2013 and 2019, both of those coming with the Bruins. Something's got to give here.
It does. And is Corey Perry looking to win the Marian Hossa Award for the most times playing for the bridesmaid and not the bride? He, of course, Marian Hossa, we should add, did go on to win it a good many times with the Chicago Blackhawks. But yeah, we'll see if Corey Perry can do it. I mean, he's a remarkable player, Corey Perry is. And what I marvel at more than anything is former MVP of the league, former leading scorer in the league, and now near the end of his career is able to allow himself to be a third or fourth liner used in just different ways. And he's okay with it. He adapts to it and does it. Most stars cannot do that. They cannot ever say, I'm not where I used to be. I've got to take a back seat. They won't do it. They always think that they're who they used to be.
Yeah, but you really don't have an argument when you've got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl along your flanks.
No, but you got to admit, Perry has been, very little. He hasn't been getting the kind of ice time even close to what he used to get in his career.
Correct. But he picks his spots. He knows what to do. He always knows where to go. And I look forward to seeing this matchup in particular. They may not play head-to-head that often, but just to watch these two go at it and see who comes out on top is going to be one of the great sidebar stories in this series.
And they pretty much have played in a different conference their whole careers. Marchand has been mostly in the East. I mean, it has been totally in the East, not mostly. And Perry has had a stint in the East with Montreal and Tampa Bay, but certainly the bulk of his career being in Anaheim and then a little bit in Dallas. And then, of course, now with Edmonton, a small sliver with Chicago. Those are all Western teams.
Yeah, certainly are. And that'll wrap up 3 things you need to pay attention to, brought to you by UBS Financial Services, Inc. Now, once again, let's welcome in Craig Button.
Well, it's that time again to do some previews. Now, this time of only 2 teams because we're down to the final. And my good friend Craig Button from TSN, all the way from Rimouski, Quebec, joins us. Craig, thank you for coming on again. I know how painful it must be to do this show.
It's not painful at all. It's a lot of fun. Neil, we've known each other a long time. You're a friend, and Vic puts it all together, and we get to this point in the season. I mean, Neil, I think about you going to the Rangers, and everything, the anticipation of getting to a Stanley Cup Final, and you think about winning it, right? And that's what these two teams are thinking about. That's what the fans are thinking about, and that's what makes this tie-in so special. So to have me be part of it, I feel very privileged to and honored to be part of your show.
Well, one thing that you have in your possession that is safe is your Dallas Stars Stanley Cup ring. It's the only version that's ever been produced. And for at least another year, it will be the only one out there. So actually, I have something that hasn't been produced in 85 years too. But I mean, no.
You do have that too, Neil. What's really neat, and you have your name on the Stanley Cup. And, you go and you look at the Stanley Cup, and it's such a magnificent trophy, and it's a magnet. And, when you celebrate winning it and you're with the group, the players, the coaches, management, and everybody, it's infinite. intimate. But then when you get with the cup outside of that circle and you watch other people, it's amazing how people are mesmerized by the Stanley Cup. And I just think about, having your name on the Stanley Cup, it's forever. And you just, like, I pinch myself thinking about all the names of all the great players, great coaches, great managers that have their name on the Stanley Cup. And I pinch myself thinking that my name's there on, in company.
And wouldn't your dad be proud?
Yeah, he would.
That's the other thing. A great scout for the Washington Capitals during the David Poile era. Jack Button, I had the privilege of knowing him and going to many games with him. So those were the days. But anyway, the other thing is about Stanley Cup rings is there's a lot of people who are fascinated with those rings too. They've never seen one. Like, just think about that. You and I take them a little bit for granted. You can't help it. When you own one, it's not a big deal. You've seen it a million times. But when I wear those things, particularly to a hockey game, I only wear them to the hockey games. People love that. I mean, they take pictures just of the ring. They don't want me. They want to see the ring. So it's we should both be very proud of our careers that we earned our way to a Stanley Cup ring.
Yeah, very few people. And like when you think, I think before the real rapid expansion, in the 90s, I think they said less than 5% of the people that have participated in the game in some way have been part of the Stanley Cup and won a Stanley Cup. I think that's closer, maybe a little bit above 10% now. But it's still humbling to think that, 10% of the people that have been involved in the game for over 100 years have been able to, savor a Stanley Cup victory. And, to think that you're in that small group, it is. And, Neil, you're right. We kind of just lay it low, play low, be humble about it. But it's something that like I said earlier, I pinch myself thinking about being part of the stand. And Neil, all the people that you won with, it's forever. And you just pick up. Whenever you run into anybody, you just pick up. And it's no different with any champion.
That's for sure.
Well, there's two teams left. Defending champion against the runner-up from a year ago. So somebody's got a score to settle here, that being the Edmonton Oilers against the Florida Panthers. Both teams finished third in their divisions during the course of the season, but they have found their way to the final. The Oilers defeated the Kings in 6, Golden Knights in 5, and the Dallas Stars in 5. Florida gets there by virtue of beating Tampa in 5, Toronto in 7, and the Carolina Hurricanes in 5. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to look at 7 different areas and have discussion on each one. And then after our break, we'll come back and we'll have our Stanley Cup final predictions, along with the update of the current standings, since Craig has been along with us for all 3 of the previous rounds. So we're going to start with styles. And I think we've seen what the Florida Panthers certainly are all about. They can beat you in open ice. They can beat you in the alley. They like to grind. They like to get under your skin. And conversely, the Edmonton Oilers, known far more for their offense. But one of the things that Neil and I have pointed out, Craig, over time during the course of the Dallas series in particular, is how much more they have embraced and taken pride in the defensive part of the game.
Yeah, there's no question. Their defensive game has been really good, and they've shown that they can win a game low scoring. We know they can win a game high scoring. And I think that's a really important element for any team. Each game is going to look different, and situation going to rise. So you got to be able. So they've looked really adaptable to different styles that they were confronted with, and emerged victorious. So that's a really important thing, really important element to know that you can play different styles as is required.
Neil, you've talked a lot. We've talked a lot about how teams have to make adjustments, particularly when they lose during the course of a series in order to prevail. If one team is executing more to their optimum level, which one is going to have to make the bigger adjustment in order to succeed in the series and overcome what might be a little bit of a shortcoming in their own game?
It's a great question. Florida, we talk about Edmonton taking pride in their defensive game. Well, Florida has two candidates for the Selke Trophy. Out of three candidates, two play for the Florida Panthers, and that's Sasha Barkov and Sam Reinhart. And they're two of their best players. So right away, they're taking pride in their defensive game. Not just those two, but the whole team, because the captain is Sasha Barkov. You're not going to let him down. I think Edmonton's going to have to stay doing what they've been doing in taking pride in their defensive game. Offense will come for them because they're so terrific at that. I think that Florida is going to have a bit of an edge in the physicality department, and Edmonton's going to have to stay away from taking penalties because Florida has a terrific power play, as well as Edmonton, obviously.
Yeah, when I look at Florida, again, I'm going to look at that third line, and I think that becomes Barkov versus Draisaitl or McDavid. You got Sam Bennett who's comfortable playing against anybody, but Edmonton's third line, they better get real comfortable playing against Florida's third line because the physicality and Neil, you talk about the defensive side of things. I mean, Lundell's a fellow countryman. He wants to be mini Barkov. So you got Barkov on the front end, you got Lundell, and I mean that makes them really. And Barkov and Lundell and Bennett all play different styles. So you start to think about how you're going to match up against them. Dallas, their centers were all the same.
Good point.
So in this regard, I don't think we could say stylistically either team has an advantage because they are who they are. And it will be the team that probably adapts and performs better against the other when they're playing at optimum level that will probably succeed the most in the series. Can we agree on that?
I can. I go back to this. I think for Edmonton to win this series, one of the elements is they're not going to be hard and edgy like the Florida Panthers. I don't think they have to prove that they're hard and edgy. If they get into scenarios where they got to prove that they're hard and heavy, I think that plays away from them. They got to do what the Montreal Canadiens did in 1976 versus the Philadelphia Flyers. Just say, give us your best shot. We're not going away.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, Craig. You're really right. Then, I'm impressed with Florida's discipline in that they go right to the edge and they don't go over with Marchand, Bennett, and also obviously Matthew Tkachuk. And they do draw. They did a good job of drawing Carolina into some silly stuff, like especially Sebastian Aho and others. And they'll be trying to do that to the Oilers as well. And the Oilers have got to just say, as you just said, give us your best shot. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
So do the forwards dictate really what this series is going to look like? Because the defensive cores strong on both teams, but is it the forwards that actually create the attitude? And we certainly know that the offensive brilliance is on the Edmonton side, the physicality along with some of that offensive brilliance on the Florida side. It's almost like a Venn diagram where both forward groups had their identities, but both could play in the other's sort of specialty as well.
We have 97 and 29. And those two players can tilt the game in Edmonton's favor quickly. I thought, we talked about goaltenders making timely saves. And I'm not talking about overtime winners, heroes in overtime or those types of things. I'm talking about scoring goals that break the back of your opponent. And I think that McDavid and Draisaitl have done that through these playoffs. They've had some winning goals in overtime, but the fourth goal against Dallas in game 5, Dallas is mounting up an attack. It's 3-2. It's 3-2. Stop, block, the other way, it's 4-2. Just like that, McDavid. And I think that quick strike, explosive offense, 97-29 give the Oilers an advantage in that regard.
I think you're right on, Craig, as far as the Oilers are concerned so far. But let me just go back to Tampa Bay. Kucherov couldn't get going. He couldn't do anything against Florida. And he's in that level, I think, with Draisaitl and McDavid. Toronto, I hate to drum it up again, but Matthews couldn't get going, couldn't do anything. Nylander wasn't the same. I mean, he couldn't get going. And in Carolina, they probably, they don't have the depth of stars that those other two teams have. And Aho did produce short, breakaway goals. Jarvis chipped in some goals, but they don't have, I don't think, those high end Matthews, Kucherov type players. My point here is that Florida's been able to take the game away from all the best players so far in the playoffs. Will they be able to take McDavid's game away? I think Craig mentioned something right at the outset that I hadn't thought of. Dumb me. Barkov out there every time McDavid's out there. That's going to be a hard. I can tell you, McDavid's not going to be able to get that stupendous the other night against Dallas, which was just brilliance above brilliance. I don't think he'll be able to do that when Barkov's on the ice.
No, I agree with you, Neil, too. And I think that one of the things when you talk about Florida, they smother you. Like McDavid, Florida doesn't give you a chance to wind up. Like you start to wind up, somebody's on you. And if you get a step, the next guy's in your way. And I think, when we go back a little bit, Vic, to stylistically, I see that as a big advantage. And I'm using the word big purposely. I see that as a big advantage for the Florida Panthers. And I'm going to tell you why. Because in the first two games and the first two periods of game 3 against LA, Edmonton had no answer. They had no answer. They were smothered. They were stifled. And then, for whatever reason, the coach of the LA Kings decided we were going to play differently. And the Edmonton Oilers took advantage. Paul Maurice isn't going to decide to play differently.
No.
For Chris Knoblauch also, can they roll 4 lines the same way Florida can? Because it seems in each series, one of the top 3 lines kind of stood out as they went along. In the second round against Toronto, the second line for the Panthers was invisible in terms of production. Then in the third round, became their time to shine. And you talk about this third line with Marchand, Luosterainen, and Lundell, and they can roll 4. Question to you, do you believe that Knoblauch and the Oilers can match that?
I would say without Hyman, it becomes more of a challenge. And the uncertainty of where Connor Brown is at extends that challenge for Chris Knoblauch. And they're without Hyman, and Hyman is a catalyst out there. And Hyman's kind of a Mr. Fix-It. You can put him in a lot of different areas to help different players and to help your team. They don't have anybody else like that. And Connor Brown has been a real good player for the Edmonton Oilers last year in the playoffs, this year again. Those two guys, I think, take away the ability, because you got to put Jeff Skinner and Victor Arvidsson in there. Trust me, Chris Knoblauch standing there looking at 33 and 53, and he's not feeling comfortable having those guys go out on the ice.
You're right. He'd much rather have 18, which is Zach Hyman's number, sitting there, because, one thing that I've really noticed in watching Edmonton thoroughly now during the playoffs is how good a defensive game Zach Hyman has developed. People just thought he was a goal scorer from last year, and then all they talked about early this year was how he wasn't scoring, and that was all true. But he made some spectacular defensive moves to shut down plays on Dallas and also on Vegas. I'm really impressed with him, and I think losing him is going to be a big hole, bigger in the defensive side of the game, as strange as it might sound, than on the offensive side.
And perhaps we do see Connor Brown earlier than later in this series, simply because there is such a wide gap in between the last game that the Oilers played against the Stars and the series not opening up until Wednesday evening. So about 6 days off. So perhaps Brown will be ready to go by the time this series gets underway. Let's look at the defense for a second. Mattias Ekholm coming back for the Oilers, joins Nurse, joins Evan Bouchard. This is a pretty solid unit that has played very well as the competition has gone along. And of course, the Panthers, Ekblad and Nikola, and Seth Jones has been outstanding. So where do you see an edge on the back lines?
I'll go first, Craig. I think that Seth Jones' acquisition was magic for the Florida Panthers. Craig, you haven't heard me say this because I think I only said it when I was on Wraparound with Vic, but Seth Jones comes into the league and drafted by Nashville. Wasn't a very good team. Gets traded to Columbus. Perennially not a very good team. Signs a big deal with Chicago right in the time when they start to go down the drain. And he doesn't play for a very good Chicago. And I'm sure there's a lot of people, managers included, out there saying, I know he's a good player, but he's always played for a bad team. Can he be a good player on a good team? And he has proven that he's a damn good player on a good team. In fact, I'm here to say that he has put Seth Jones into the number 2 spot. He's taken over the number 1 defenseman on the Florida Panthers. So those two offensive guys have been great in the playoffs for them. I mean, Bouchard has a shot that nobody has in the league from the point. Nurse is always involved. I think he's really good. And Ekholm was a marvelous trade by Ken Holland to bring him in from Nashville a couple of years ago. Is there bottom 3? Who's got the better bottom 3? That remains to be seen, I think. You might be able to say Edmonton, but then, there'd be an argument the other way. I do think that Ekblad and Jones stacked up against Bouchard and Nurse, or take 2 of those 3. I think cerebrally, you might give the edge to Jones and Ekblad. I'm not saying those other guys are stupid by any means, but there might be more playmaking ability in those 2 star defensemen for the Panthers.
One of the areas that I looked at with the Dallas Stars, even over the course of the year, I know Jim Nill addressed it at one point by adding Cody Ceci, but that right side defense for the Dallas Stars, it wasn't very good. And Edmonton was able to really drive a wedge through that side. And just simply put, I mean, you got Petrovic, you got CC, and you got Lyabushkin. It's not, I mean, we're talking about bottom pair defensemen that have to play top minutes. Seth Jones and Aaron Ekblad, the Oilers are not going to have the same advantage over there. We talk about the middle of the ice, the right side D and then you got Forsling and you got Mikola on the other side. So, you start to think about, where Edmonton's trying to exploit, where they're trying to do. And I agree with you, Neil. Seth Jones and Aaron Ekblad. Yeah, Bouchard's big on the power play, big offensively, moves the puck and everything. But I think in terms of playing defense, back to where we started, Vic, defensively, I think that's an edge for the Florida Panthers.
And that's a question I was going to ask you, Craig, because, of course, defense is a 6-man game in this. It's a collective unit, all operating in sync with one another. However, which unit as a group would be able to handle the other team better? Meaning, will the Panthers be able to keep up with the Oilers' speed and their skill? Or will the Oilers' defense be able to hold up under the constant pressure coming from the Panthers?
Well, and that pressure is going to be constant. We know that. We talk about, the Florida Panthers are not wavering. So when we talk about defense too, and we're going to go back to Barkov and Bennett and Lundell. Like for the Edmonton Oilers, they got to go through layers. So you got to go through that layers of forwards. Then you got to get through the layer of defense. Now you got Bobrovsky sitting there waiting. That's why I said the Edmonton Oilers are going to have to show that they're just going to keep pushing through, because the Florida Panthers are not an easy team to push through. Rod Brindamore, I forget what game it was against Florida. Maybe it was game 2. He said, "Oh no, we had lots of chances. Maybe it was game 1." I don't want to hear about chances. The playoffs are about results. It's wins and losses and results. It doesn't matter. Oh, well, we had lots of great A's. Well, great. How many goals did you score? And again, those layers that Florida has, they're hard. Those are hard layers to get through.
That's a very good observation, Craig. That's I've never heard it put that way, and it's right on. When you got a Paul Maurice team, that's how he coaches his teams. They got to play that way. They have to get through the layers, and they're going to try to wear them down. Now, we got to talk about a little bit about how good the Edmonton Oilers are and how fast they are and how creative they are. Will that be able to overcome some of those layers? I imagine it will from time to time. That speed and that skill and so on will be able to put a knife through those layers. Will it be able to do it constantly? I don't think so. But one thing we know that the layers will constantly be there.
They will be. And again, the persistence of going, and now we get back to 3 lines versus 4 lines, right? And the Hyman loss. And I think the Hyman loss, Neil, you and me agree, but you work so hard to try to gain an advantage on Barkov, and you go, oh God, now I got to gain an advantage on Jones or Forsling. And then even if you get these grade A's and Bobrovsky's back there, that can really kill the spirit of a team. You can be doing so many things right, and then you get stymied in one area or the second area or the third area. That's what makes winning so bloody hard. Your team in New York and other teams that you had. Bottom line, you have to get through those forwards, and and then Mike Richter's sitting back there, okay, I got this. And the other thing about Florida and your Rangers team, our team in Dallas, other teams, like the goalies knew they were going to have to make 6-7 really good saves a game. So that also made it really predictable for them that they weren't going to be under siege. And so now they just go about their business. They knew what the job was, and they were elite goalies.
So that's a perfect segue here. Let's talk some goalies, because Sergei Bobrovsky, consistent, has been what he has been during the entire playoffs. 3 shutouts, 12-3 record. No problem there. Very few soft goals in these playoffs. And now we have seen Stu Skinner, who started the playoffs, let's just say bad, for lack of a better term. It was a rough start. Calvin Pickard came in, looked like he was going to carry the mail for a while. He gets hurt. Skinner comes in, and now he's got 3 shutouts since becoming the number 1 again, and his goals against average is microscopic. It's below 2, and his save percentage since he's returned is actually better than Bobrovsky's. Can he make the requisite saves necessary to even the playing field out? And I want to add one more thing here for you, Craig, first. I don't believe Skinner saw enough traffic from Dallas throughout that entire series. And he's going to have a whole lot of asses in his faces in this series.
Yeah, I think somebody told Stuart Skinner, you're Grant Fuhrer. So somebody's got to make sure they don't tell Stuart Skinner that he's Stuart Skinner. As long as he thinks he's somebody else, he's proven to be really, really good. There was a line many years ago. I don't know. I forget who the player was, but the guy came off the ice, and Barry Stafford, the trainer at Edmonton, said to Glenn Sather, the coach, he goes, he doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know who he is. He goes, tell him he's Messier. I think somebody told Stuart Skinner, you're Grant Fuhrer, go and play. What's amazing, he seems to be all or nothing, and literally nothing. The shutouts, win, or he gets. When he let that goal in by Jason Robertson, the third goal, I'm watching. I'm going, oh boy, here we go. Oilers, and then obviously, Jake Ottinger, it wasn't Ottinger that time. It was Casey DeSmith. That puck goes off a Lindell skate, Kane's goal, and that was curtains. But I was just, that's one thing that the Florida Panthers, they played against Stuart Skinner last year. I don't think they're looking at a goaltender that they feel that they can't beat. And you're right. There's going to be a lot of traffic there. Oh yeah. You know what else is going to be? Bumping, falling into them, poking them.
Yeah.
Let's look at these two teams and their opponents so far in the playoffs. It's really interesting when you think about the Florida Panthers. They started off with Tampa and they made Vasilevsky look not like Vasilevsky. Then they go into Toronto and they literally, I still don't think it was on purpose, but they literally knock Stolarz out of the series, and they get Joseph Wall for the rest of that series. They play Carolina, and they make Rod Brindamore play both the different goalies, still trying to find one that'll stop Florida. But on the other side, Darcy Kemper stayed in the whole series against the Oilers. Vegas had, who was their main guy? Aiden Hill. Did take away Dallas's most important ingredient, I think, and that was Ottinger. Or maybe we can say Peter DeBoer took it away for them. But they got to him. The Oilers were able to get to him. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is they will be able to get, Florida will get to Stuart Skinner. It's whether Stuart Skinner can stay in his zone that he's been in. I do think, too, that Edmonton, with their skill, will be able to score on Bobrovsky at times because they're so much better than what they've seen so far. But Florida's pretty good at making a goalie feel like he's not very good. They've done that through these three series. I'm not waving a flag for Florida, but I'm just trying to bring reality into it that while Edmonton made Ottinger look very ordinary, Florida made three different guys look very ordinary.
Well, and Kemper won a Stanley Cup with Colorado, and the Oilers had a little bit of a look at him. Remember, Kemper got the eye injury in that series, so he didn't play the whole time. And then Aiden Hill beat them in 23 when Vegas won. And so, with the benefit of having a little bit of knowledge about playing against those guys and then coming back and showing the way, well, they have that with Bobrovsky. They went to 7 last year with Bobrovsky. And you're right. Florida has the ability to make the good goalies look ordinary. Edmonton's shown an ability to learn, and find some weaknesses in goalies they faced before and didn't have success. And that's going to be a key here for them.
How good does Stu Skinner have to be? How much does his game need to be elevated in order to somewhat level out the playing field? At least the way it's perceived right now is that Bobrovsky is still way superior to Skinner. But in the last series, we also thought the same thing of Jake Ottinger.
I think Skinner's got to get ready for a lot of people in front of him, bumping and trying to throw him off his game. Something that I don't think Dallas did enough of. He's going to have to get ready for that with Florida. Bobrovsky, he knows Edmonton. I mean, he knows how good these guys are. He played against them last year. He knows what he's going to face now, which is a lot harder than he's just faced with Carolina, Toronto, and Tampa.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think average goaltending gets it done for Edmonton and Stuart Skinner. I don't think he has to be Dominic Hasek like, but he's going to have to be better. Like when I say better, I'm not talking about he's been good when he's been there, but average goaltending I don't think gets it done for the Edmonton Oilers. He's going to have to find a way because Florida puts you under siege, and when you get under siege, you need your goaltender there. And that's the thing I'm not so sure Skinner can handle, the siege.
Let's jump to another area that is going to get a lot of focus, and that's the special teams. And Neil, you had just spoken before how the Panthers have learned to take it right up to the line, maybe go over a little bit, but remain disciplined to the point where they're not taking a lot of foolish penalties. And you look at their penalty killing during the course of the first 3 rounds, it's just a tick under 88%, tops in the league. But also remember, the Edmonton power play at home, 56.2%. So that is something that I think we're going to need to look out for. And also something that's a little bit understated. And I think, Craig, you pointed this out before. The Florida power play on the road, 42.9%. So this is a series that if one of these power plays can truly stand out and the penalty killing on the other side can somewhat subdue the other team, this could be a huge difference here.
Oh, there's these special teams. You just mentioned those numbers. That's why you're in the final, because you have those numbers, because you are able to do things like that. That you've got this power play that scares everybody, and that most times you score on it. And that's what these two teams have. And they've got great penalty killing too. And again, I hate to make it sound so simplistic, but that's why we're going to be watching them in the final because they have that. And if you have bad special teams in the playoffs, you're not in the playoffs for very long.
Yes. Edmonton's penalty kill last year in the playoffs was simply exceptional. I mean, it was unbelievable. And that number you put out there for their power play this year, Vic, like especially at home, that has really made up for a really poor penalty kill. The Oilers' penalty kill has not been good. And so, but special teams matter. So can the Florida Panthers stop the Oilers' power play? And conversely, can the Edmonton Oilers improve their penalty kill? Because, both those things don't happen. Oh boy, we might have a higher scoring series than I think we're going to have. But I think that if we talk about areas of the special teams that have to take both teams, like the Oilers power play, because in the playoffs, if you don't score on the power play, okay, that's fine. You haven't scored. But when you give up a power play goal against, you got to go find a goal. That's harder to do. And I think penalty killing for the Oilers has to be something. And I think it's going to have to be something for Florida. There's one thing about Edmonton, when they get rolling and they get a power play, they use it for juice. Like that seems to be the current that runs through their team. And they can give up goals and be down. Oh, power play. Oh, here we go. And the other team's back on their heels. So special teams, in a broader sense, specific sense, I think are going to be really big. And to Neil's point, they should be big at this point in the season.
Neil, I just wanted to point out before you respond there that the Oilers' penalty killing throughout these playoffs, 66%. So they're only killing 2 out of every 3, and that's 14th out of the 16 teams that started the tournament.
And that's not going to be good enough for the Panthers. I can tell you that will not be good enough for the Panthers because they're going to try to draw you into penalties, and you are going to take some penalties against them. I never forget that Sebastian Aho situation where the guy came in and cross-checked him really hard, so he grabbed him around the head, and all of a sudden Aho was in the penalty box by himself. And I think they actually scored on that mistake. But no, as we both have said, special teams are really important. And then the other thing I want to emphasize, and Craig knows this like the back of his hand, it's the only part of hockey really where you can sit down and study what they're doing on their power play. What are they doing on their penalty kill? There's set plays in the NHL. It's the only time when really you have a chance to do real set plays for a period of time, because otherwise everything's moving too fast. And although you have a structure to defend and a structure to get into the zone, on the power play and the penalty kill, you have an exact, they know, they've practiced it, they've done it 1,000 times, and now they're going to be able to watch Edmonton for 6 days. They're going to be sitting watching their power play and their penalty kill.
Yeah, just like football, Vic, like to Neil's point, when you got your offensive schemes and the defense is trying to figure out how to stop them, that's exactly to Neil's point. And that every play stops and starts in football, but the power play is one that literally is similar in that regard, where you can study it and try to figure out how to break it.
But if you're at 66%, as the Oilers are you lining up at the blue line? Are you allowing Florida access into the zone? Are you trying to pressure the points? Because when you've got a club that is performing as well on the road on the power play as the Panthers are, what sort of strategy are you trying to devise to combat that?
Well, one of the things with the Oilers, if you go back and watch how they killed penalties so successfully last year, and it was really successful, They use a schematic where they rotate through. Well, to Neil's point, teams have watched it now. So what do? They adapt. I don't think the Oilers have adapted. Or they haven't adapted well enough. And so now you're trying to adjust things. They still do things very similarly. And, at this point in the year, to try to get, different plan in place is not easy. But teams have exploited it. They have exploited that area, which is exactly what Neil talked about. You've had time to study them. You've had time to look at it. What can we do that can combat this? And my surprise is, and I think Chris Knoblauch's a heck of a coach, I'm surprised that he hasn't changed his penalty kill.
A question to that end, because maybe we go a little bit radical here. And we saw this during the Dallas series. Do you use McDavid to perhaps put that speed factor fear into Florida and something that maybe they haven't prepared for?
Well, in my opinion, you can't put him out on the ice during a penalty kill because you can't take a chance that he gets hurt. And all your penalty killers have to block shots. Now, I know Sam Reinhart kills penalties for the Panthers, and as does Barkov, and they're very important players. But boy, I don't think Gretzky was out there killing a lot of penalties for the Oilers, and I don't think Mario Lemieux went out for Pittsburgh very many times, because you take him down with a shot to the ankle, boy, your percentage of winning the series goes way up.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because Lemieux played on the penalty kill. We know Gretzky curried it, but it wasn't a shot blocking mentality. It was a different style of game now. And to Neil's point, shot blocking is an integral part of penalty killing. And I'm like, put McDavid out at the end of the penalty kill. Their better players are off. You throw them out there to try to get a little bit of an advantage. But I think there's a little bit, maybe a lot of risk in that.
Just want to throw it out there. Little bit of coaching.
No, you never know.
So,
hey. When he does it, when Knoblauch does it, we'll give you the credit.
Yeah, and like we said last time, I'm sure that they're tapping me for advice here. But nonetheless, we've got two brilliant head coaches here and have very different teams. Paul Maurice finally winning the cup last year after so many years behind the bench, and Chris Knoblauch taking over last season for Jay Woodcroft, and has not only gotten the offensive tools, but as we said at the head here, has developed a sense of pride in team defense with this club. And I know having Paul Coffey has definitely helped him behind the bench. But is there really a true advantage for the Panthers here with Knoblauch having a second year to study the Panthers, going up against the same team again? There's going to be no surprises this time around.
I don't think either team has an advantage. I love both these guys. I think Paul Maurice is fabulous. We've had him on here, and I've known him a long time, and I think he's a great coach, one of the greatest. Knoblauch is so impressive. He is so composed behind the bench. He is. I love those cerebral coaches, I call them, the guys that aren't jumping up and down and going crazy, but they're insightful. They're thinking. They're analyzing during the whole game. And I think Chris Knoblauch has done a masterful job with Edmonton over his season and a half in running that team. Of course, kind of obvious, Neil, when they've gone to the final both years.
Yeah, but at the same time, we know that there's times teams get to the final and you're really fortunate and things have gone the right way for you. And we've seen that over the years. I don't think it's accidental what Chris has done. I don't think it's accidental what Paul has done. And to your point, like what impresses me about them, I mean, we know they're sharp guys. When everything around them is upside down and topsy-turvy, they put the camera on those guys. They're just calm, cool, composed. And their team is calm, cool, composed. There's going to be times in any game, in any series, where things are like looking a little bit hairy. It's looking like a scene from a horror movie. And the coaches are not, they're not panicked. They're not going into that dark room where the axe murderer is standing behind them. And you're going, why do you want to do that? That permeates through the team. That permeates through the team. And I think they're both terrific in that regard, just like Neil outlined.
I wanted to ask you, because when it comes to replacing players, and we've seen injuries throughout these playoffs, and the ability for both of these guys to plug and play, not to miss a beat, the guy that gets inserted into the lineup being just for the sake of change or because of an injury, and that player has delivered right away. And when Boqvist had to come in, assume top line duties when Reinhart went out, he just went out and delivered.
Yeah, they really do have a lot of interchangeable parts. Colin Campbell once called the Devils a flock of interchangeable parts, which is what they really were. They didn't like that, but that's really what they were like. And I think on Florida, they know this coach so well. They know the expectations so well that when he puts him into a situation, they already know what they should do. And it doesn't matter. And we heard that overused expression, next man up, but it really truly is. And I think with both these teams, you're going to find that.
And Craig, I wanted to hit with you quickly with Edmonton that Zach Hyman goes down. First goal of the game in Dallas. Who's there? Corey Perry right on the doorstep, probably where Hyman would have been.
Well, Corey Perry, if you asked him to identify certain areas of the rink, he wouldn't be able to identify them, but he knows where to score goals, and he knows how to get right there in the face. The other thing about Corey Perry, he's not the same player he once was with respect to speed and impact, but he's a smart player. So he can play with smart players. And when you and again, back to coach to Knoblauch. Knoblauch can put him up with McDavid. He can put him with Draisaitl. He can put him on the power play. Corey's not going to play 16 minutes a night, but he can spot him in. And the beautiful thing about Corey Perry, whether you play him 10 minutes or 12 minutes or 8 minutes, you're going to get the best version of Corey Perry. And you talk about somebody that can get under the skin of an opponent. Corey Perry does it as well as anybody.
He's the sandpaper.
Yep.
And Evander Kane also, who's also done a great job, has a little bit of edginess as well, right?
Evander's played great. Evander was hurt last year, had to leave the series because he just couldn't carry forth anymore. And you think about playoff players, he's got a Claude Lemieux-esque type playoff persona.
So with that, we've gone through a lot of stuff here. Give me one intangible that you're looking for that may be able to swing this series one way or another. Neil, we'll start with you.
I think I had three ready for you, but we've already mentioned two of them. I think Corey Perry and Evander Kane are definite intangibles that, what will you get? Because they come through. I think Evan Rodriguez is definitely an intangible for them. The other one I want to say for Edmonton, Calvin Pickard. If things go wrong, will he be able to come in and do what he did in the playoffs so far, which is pick right up and win games for them? I don't think we're going to have to see that in the other end of the ice. That's who I would say. I think Edmonton has those two guys, those reclamation projects in Evander Kane and Corey Perry. And then they got that goaltending duo that I don't know who's number one and who's number two. They're both playing in this playoffs like they're number ones. But that's Rodriguez, boy, he's an important part of that team.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think the four players that can make up the depth of the Panthers, and that's Gadjevich, that's Greer, that's Milchik, and Boqvist. Those four guys. We talked about Boqvist, and I don't think Edmonton has that in their fourth line. And I think that becomes a factor. These games are tight. They're hard. I use the line, who can go the hardest, the longest. And when you have depth, that helps. And I think the third line for the Florida Panthers is another factor here. That line is so good. And, Gadjevich outscored Matthews in the Toronto series. And Marner. That type of thing with the coach, and they know what their job is, and nobody's asking them to go out and score. Daryl Sutter used to ask his players, listen, I'd like you to get the advantage of the guy across from you, but if you don't, break even. Please don't lose the battles. And I don't think the third and fourth lines for Florida lose battles.
Good point.
One player that I do want to mention, because Neil and I have spoken about it during the course of the conference finals, that is probably the counter to Evan Rodriguez in Florida, and that's Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who was just outstanding in the conference final against Dallas, Craig.
Yeah, he was. I mean, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, he's Canadian, but he's really Swiss because he's a Swiss Army knife. He can play left wing, he can play center, he can play right wing, he can kill penalties, he can play on the power play. And like the Swiss, he's neutral. He doesn't offend anybody, he doesn't make anybody mad, and he helps you, and he enriches you, just like anybody that invests in Swiss banking or Swiss finance knows.
And he's a first overall pick that hasn't disappointed, but hasn't lit the league on fire. So usually those first overalls are, lighting the league on fire, or else everybody's bemoaning the fact that they got picked first overall. I think Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is somewhere in between, where he's been a good player for a very, very long time for the Edmonton Oilers.
And he's really settled in to just being who he is. They accept who he is. He's accepted who he is. Nobody talks about, he didn't become the player they thought he was as a first overall pick. He's a really good, like what I would call one of those really good, quiet players. Like when we used to prepare for the playoffs, and I know, Neil, you did it too, we would try to identify the other team's good, quiet players. And we would try our hardest to try to make them uncomfortable. You weren't pushing Mark Messier out of a game. You weren't pushing Peter Forsberg or Joe Sakic out of a game. But you tried to do it with those good, quiet players. And you weren't always successful, but Nugent-Hopkins is one of those really good, quiet players.
I'm going to hold my intangible until it's time to render our predictions, which are coming up in a moment. Neil, it's called a tease. And before we do that, remind you that our website is NHLWraparound.com. Stanley Cup date will resume following games 1 and 2 of the series in the coming week. At our next Wraparound, Tuesday, June 10th, we will be joined by legendary writer Stan Fischler. And before we go on to our next part of the show, Neil, the collar on your shirt looks outstanding once again from our friends from Lugaroo.
Yeah, aren't these great? Hey, Craig, I got to get you one of these shirts. These shirts are so comfortable, you don't think you got anything on. I mean, they're a different material. There's no stitching in the seams at all. The collars stay up no matter what. Like on a normal polo shirt, you know how they get all curly and wrinkly, and you got to get somebody to iron them, and they don't have. I'm sorry to say this, you won't like this. They don't have buttons. They have snaps. So I know if your name was Craig Snap, you would have enjoyed this. But no, that's great. And they make a whole line of different apparel that's really great for active people that, don't worry about if you sweat in it, you can throw it in the wash and take it out and you look great. But Lugaroo was nice enough, and Colin Mulvey, a former ECHL player, was nice enough to make us these designer shirts with our logo on it. And so we feel like we're high end now.
They look great. They do look great. There's no question about it. There's times when you try to push something that looks great and doesn't look so great. Those look great.
They do. So listeners and viewers that are watching on YouTube, please support Lugaroo. That's LOOGAROO.co. Lugaroo.co. Before we get to our predictions, a couple of questions. We've thrown these out during the course of all of our preview shows. And I want to go back to the conference final, particularly the Edmonton-Dallas series. And I posed this to Neil the other day, Craig, and I'd be curious to get your take on this, because I think it's 6-1, half dozen of the other, but maybe you see it a little bit differently. In the West Final, did we underestimate Edmonton or did we overestimate Dallas?
I overestimated Dallas. When you go back and look at certain things, their defensive play wasn't very good. Jake Ottinger had really played well, and I thought carried a lot of their play. Wyatt Johnson, Mason Marchment, Jason Robertson, Matt Duchene had come into that series doing absolutely nothing. They left that series still doing absolutely nothing. So, you can sit here and hope that the defensive play improves. You can sit here and hope that those four players find a way to score. They didn't. So I clearly overestimated the Dallas Stars.
And it was the same for me, Vic, as I've said on previous shows, that I was disappointed in Dallas.
Yeah. And I think we pretty much saw what we expected in the Carolina-Florida series also, was that one thing we looked at is Carolina just has that same kind of look year after year, and it can only get them so far. And that was exposed again in the series against Florida.
It was. And they have if you saw Rod Brindamore's comments, Craig, I don't know if you read them, where he said, I looked at that team and at our team in the beginning of the year. I didn't think we'd make the playoffs. And that's quite a statement. But then they obviously did have a good regular season. But they're going to have to find some other ingredients in Carolina that they don't have to be able to push that over that next level and win more than one conference final game.
I agree with you. I mean, it's no accident they're 1-12 in their last three conference finals.
So let's look ahead to next season with the Stanley Cup Final starting between Florida and the Edmonton Oilers. But if we fast forward and you look at the clubs that are out there, which team has the core components in place to best challenge in their conferences next season, should they appropriately tweak their teams? Craig, I'm going to start with you on this.
Everybody's going to tweak their team in the offseason. I mean, it's just natural. There's 7 or 8 players that go off of good teams, let alone the other teams that are falling short and everything. We've talked about this on this show previously. I think Bill Guerin in Minnesota has a really great opportunity. With the cap space he's going to gain, with Suter and Parisi buyout, that money coming away. And Neil's pointed it out. It becomes a little bit more difficult when you have the money and you got to go make the right moves, and as opposed to sitting back, well, we can only do so much. I think there's a real spotlight on the Minnesota Wild. I think the other place is Winnipeg. I think Winnipeg's shown they've been a really good team. This is the time now where the moves you make in Winnipeg are either going to move you closer to where you want to achieve, leave you, or they're going to leave you or have you fall behind. And this is to me where the good managers find a way to do the things to push you along. Those aren't easy decisions, but those are the ones that have to do it. I'll go to the East real quick. I like Tampa Bay. Neil talked about it at the beginning. They're an artistic team. 2019, they couldn't do it. They made some significant moves to allow themselves to win. I think they're the one team. And then the other team, I've given up on Toronto. Sorry. I'm Toronto. I'm not even bringing them up. I've given them up on them. I'm not even talking about. I think the other team is Washington. I think they had a really good regular season. What can they do in there to do that? So I picked 4 teams, 2 from the West, 2 from the East that I think that are good teams. How do they make themselves better teams?
Well, first of all, I agree with Craig in the West about Minnesota. We've talked about it on the show before, so I won't go back on that. The other team that I think will improve, even though they got the 2 main cogs are old guys, but I think with Ken Holland going to LA will improve. He'll decide whether or not Jim Hiller has the goods to be able to push this team forward, or he'll get another coach. And I do think LA will improve. Now, I'm going to say something you guys are going to be surprised at. I'm interested to see what Brad Treliving does this offseason. Now that there is no Brendan Shanahan there, now that it's just him up to Keith Pelly, we're going to find out what kind of a manager Brad Treliving is, because how do you fill in for Marner? He's gone. Marner's gone. How do you get the right ingredients to get a team that seems to have a very limited heart to put a heart into that team. You got to find a way to put a heart in that team. You know, you got to find today's like a real captain for that team. I don't think Matthews is, and I don't know Auston, and I'm not in their room, but from just watching how they play, they need leadership to drive the bus. And we'll see if Brad Treliving can do that. We'll see. I mean, he's going to obviously talk to Craig Berube a lot. Craig Berube's a winner. I think he knows how to coach. I think he's a real good coach. But we'll see. And so that's what I would say from the East, Toronto, and in the West, Minnesota, but also the LA Kings.
Can I add one thing to Neil's comment just real quickly, Vic? If Brad Treliving doesn't consider everything on the table, including moving Matthews out, then he's not looking at what the potential. I'm not saying you have to. You got to put everything on the table here. It's 9 years. The Boston Bruins traded Joe Thornton. He was the first overall pick. We know he's the first ballot Hall of Famer. He won a Hart Trophy, all those things. The Boston Bruins, just that we got to change the construction of our team. And it wasn't easy. It's not easy to do those things. I'm not saying it is. But when you got a long track record of falling short, everything has to be on the table in Toronto. And I'm already here. Well, Morgan Riley won't waive his no trade. Okay, fine. I'd go right to Morgan Riley and say, listen, we'll work with you, but this isn't going to continue on where you can be comfortable here. And I'm not bringing back John Tavares either. Sorry, John, go somewhere else. You've been an excellent player. You're a good guy. You're not staying here. Until they decide to change the real heart of the team, that we question if they have heart, nothing will change.
That was better than anything I had to say. But I'll throw my two teams in here, and they're not any teams that have been mentioned so far. In the West, I see the Colorado Avalanche. I believe that they had a lot of the components. They couldn't hold that Game 7 2-0 lead against Dallas, but there's an awful lot to like with that club, and I think that they may be as close as any team in the West to the Edmonton Oilers right now. And over in the East, I'm looking at the New Jersey Devils because that team dealt with a lot of injuries this year. Jacob Markstrom is going to continue to be an excellent goaltender. They'll get Jack Hughes back. Their defense will be healthy. I mean, they had nobody on their back line by the end of that opening round series against Carolina. So it's the Devils that I am looking at. So I'm glad that we all took different clubs in this, and we can play this segment back next year to see how well we did. However, it is now time for our Stanley Cup final predictions. And as we know, Neil's going to probably take his Lugaroo shirt off and pump his chest because he's at 10-4. Craig, you're at 9-5. I'm at 8-6. We all went 1-1, winning with Florida and all losing with Dallas. And I have to say one thing here, Craig, is that this series truly has all of the earmarks of a 7-game series. Can we agree on that?
I'm clucking.
Are you? So, as you know, our archives of photos are pretty deep on NHL Wraparound. And before we did the conference finals, we had me and the San Diego Chicken. And this time around, we have our special guest coming to the fore here.
Oh.
So there'll be no chickening out with Mr. Smith with some sort of foul on his head. And as I said, this has all the earmarks of a 7-game series. So let's see, will we be chickening out here and taking the 7 games, or will we go in a little bit different direction? Craig, you first.
I'm not going 7. In the 1997 Stanley Cup Final, I remember we were sitting around, we were having meetings, and Philadelphia had home ice. And the first game, and everybody thought Philadelphia was going to steamroll the Red Wings. Eric Lindros was that at his peak. And after the first game, after the first game, Detroit played really well. And I said, this could end up in a sweep. And heads spun around, like in The Exorcist. You remember when The Exorcist, the heads spun around? The heads were spinning around. It ended up in a sweep. I'm not predicting a sweep. I'm predicting 6 games. And I'm predicting that the Edmonton Oilers are going to win the Cup in 6. They will win the Cup in Florida in Game 6, and they'll have that great celebration just with the group, fly back home, and then the Oilers can party. And the Canadian drought will end. I thought it would end with Winnipeg. I think it does end with Edmonton.
Neil?
I'm going to go full Swiss chalet.
Saint-Hubert, I'm in Rimouski.
I'm going to go full foul on this one and say 7 games, but I'm going to take Florida in 7 again. Disappointing Canada right in Edmonton, Alberta. And Vic, after you make your prediction, I want to throw something else out there, but go ahead with yours.
You're running out to get the chicken head? Put it on live?
No, it's in our other house.
All right. So it's about 700 miles in New Jersey, but nonetheless, we appreciate going full chicken here. I'm going to go along with Craig, and I'm going to bring in my intangible here in that the motivational piece for Edmonton, to me, is very significant. When you saw the pain on Connor McDavid's face a year ago when they lost, and of course, did not come out to accept the Conn Smythe Trophy. This is also the 4th time since expansion that we have had a repeat final in consecutive years. The generational players in the last 2 lost the first time and won the last time. And that was Wayne Gretzky losing to the Islanders in 83 and winning in 84. And Sidney Crosby losing to the Red Wings in 2008 and winning in 09. And I think it's Connor McDavid's time. The Oilers don't want to feel that pain again. And I just feel that the motivational piece for the Oilers in getting something that they have not gotten and did not get last year outweighs the desire of the Florida Panthers in their defense of the Stanley Cup. And I'm going to surprise you and say, I like the Oilers in 5.
Wow. Well, you've heard of a brass monkey?
Well, there's some brass something here.
Here's what I want to throw out at you two guys, because I just want to make it a bit more fun. I'm going to ask you for things. Vic, you can write them down so that we have them as predictions. Who will score the most goals in the final? What player will score the most goals in the final? Vic, you first.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to say Leon Draisaitl.
Boy, you're really taking a chance there.
And if the Oilers win in 5 and Draisaitl scores 8 goals in this series, you will apologize.
Yes, I will.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
And Mr. Button?
Carter Verhaeghe.
I'm going to say Sam Reinhart, number 13 on the Florida Panthers. Last question for the predictions. Does Stuart Skinner make it all the way through this series? Craig, you can go first.
No. I think that Pickard saved their season early in the playoffs here. I think he delivers the Stanley Cup.
Vic?
Does this mean getting pulled out of any single game? Or,
No,
or
does he start every game in the final?
I'm going to say
Craig,
he does. I'm going to say he does.
Yep.
Okay.
No, I think after the Oilers go down 2-1, they have to pull out Pickard.
Okay. I'm going to go
Then
along.
they win the next 3.
I'm going along with Craig on this. I don't think that, well, who knows? But I have a feeling that they're going to have to use Kelvin Pickard at some time. And Vic, I hand it back over to you. You run the show, but I just thought it'd be fun to have 2 more things in there.
I think it's fun. Keep in mind this too. Stolars didn't finish the series versus Florida. Anderson got pulled in the series.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
I know you know. I know.
Well, Craig, this has been terrific. 4 appearances with us to really go through the entire Stanley Cup road together. And hopefully, perhaps you might even join us again after the draft and after free agency has begun, because we love your perspective. We love your insight. And best of all, we can have a lot of fun while really doing the meat and potatoes stuff of breaking these things down.
Well, it's fun, and I really enjoy this, and we do. It's good banter. It's good back and forth. I'm not so sure I really believe that the Oilers can win, but I was betting that Neil was going to pick Florida, so that if Edmonton does win, I become the winner because I picked the Stanley Cup winner in the last round. We'll be tied at 10-5.
Craig, you've been so gracious with your time and doing this and helping us and helping this show. You deserve either a shirt or a coffee mug, one or the other. And when I see you next in the flesh, I am going to give you either a shirt or a coffee mug.
Okay, I will be very gracious of accepting the gift. But I'm more than gracious to accept the gift that you've given me to be part of this show.
Oh, thank you. You're so kind.
We've loved it, every minute of it. And thanks again for your time. And we've been so grateful to have Craig Button joining us throughout these Stanley Cup playoffs. He is leaving Rimouski, where he was on the broadcast team for TSN calling the Memorial Cup, where on Sunday, London defeated Medicine Hat 4-1. This is the 3rd win for the Knights in their history, all coached by one-time NHL ruffian Dale Hunter, who's also a hell of a player at the same time. Ethan Cowan, a left wing who's the 1st-round pick and 28th overall for Toronto in 2023, was the tournament MVP. And maybe if Mitch Marner skips town, there's room for Cowan to jump in there. But also of note, the other titles that the Knights had in the Memorial Cup, 2005 and 2016, and teammates on that club, Matthew Tkachuk and Evan Bouchard, facing off against each other in the final.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? And what a franchise the London Knights are. And I remember the London Knights used to be owned by the same gentleman owned the Ottawa 67s and the London Knights at the same time, playing at the London Gardens. Of course, one of the things that's helping the current Knights is they got a beautiful building now in London, Ontario, that is a great attraction for fans to come to. But the Hunters have done a remarkable job with the London Knights franchise. And if you remember, Dale Hunter went in and coached the Washington Capitals for a time and went back to junior on his own. He decided he didn't want to coach Washington anymore, and he went back to junior. And I find that just remarkable. And he has done just an incredible job with the London Knights.
Really has. Some other news from around the NHL. We've got a bunch of re-signings, so we're going to go through these quickly. Kyle Palmieri re-ups with the New York Islanders 2 years. Average of $4.75 million per year on the cap hit. He was a pending UFA. He stays with the club, as does Adam Boqvist. For 1 year at $850,000, he was a pending RFA. Also, Tyson Forster had a pretty good year for the Flyers. He's extended by 2 years. Average annual value of $3.75 million. He is coming off his entry-level deal, so that's a nice bump for him. Tyler Clevin, defenseman for Ottawa, Extends for 2 years, $1.6 million per season on average. And Josh Mahura, defenseman for Seattle, $907.5 thousand per year. We also have a retirement to share. Jesper Fast retires after 11 seasons in the NHL, split between the Rangers and the Carolina Hurricanes. He played 703 games in his career, but a neck injury suffered in the regular season finale in 2024 cost him the entire season last year, unable to come back. But this was one of the really dependable players in the NHL for both the Rangers and the Canes.
Do you know what Jesper Fast's nickname was?
It was Quickie.
Pretty good nickname for a guy named Fast. They called him Quickie. Typical of a dressing room in the NHL, right? This is how guys get their names. They first walk into the room. Their name is Fast. We're going to call you Quickie. But he was a good player, very dependable for the Rangers, extremely dependable for the Hurricanes. And it's too bad that he had to perhaps retire before his time was up.
He was only in his early 30s, so certainly wish him well in retirement. Couple of other items. Roope Hintz confirms he suffered a broken foot in Game 2 against the Oilers when he was slashed by Darnell Nurse.
Yes, and I guess the Department of Player Safety might want to think twice about whether or not Darnell Nurse should have had some supplementary discipline for that play. And then even worse is Evan Bouchard, who's tried to slash that foot the next time Hintz was back in the game, and that caught the attention of the cameras of national TV. So I like intimidation. I like the rough stuff. I don't like breaking bones. I think that you should be in big trouble if you do that. And in this case, Nurse gets away with it.
It's unfortunate because Hintz had to miss Game 3, did come back for Games 4 and 5, but certainly not 100%.
No, and when he's not playing, Rantanen wasn't as good. Rantanen and him were playing well together, and I think that was a blow to Dallas. I don't think Dallas was going to win that series by any stretch, but perhaps if Hintz had been in the lineup, they could have extended the series.
Not all the news is bad coming out of Dallas because longtime Stars TV analyst Darryl Ray will receive the Foster Hewitt Award for outstanding contributions as a hockey broadcaster. He has spent his last 28 seasons with the Stars, and he will be joined by Francois Gagnon, receiving the Elmer Ferguson Award for excellence in hockey journalism. He has spent over 3 decades as the voice of reason for print reporting in French Canada. And of course, I'm going to be nominating you for top podcast co-host whenever such an award gets created.
Hopefully we're still alive when that gets created. Darryl Ray, I want to add, I remember him playing, I believe it was in Kamloops, was drafted, of course, high in the NHL. At the time when he came into the league, we hadn't seen goaltenders this tall. And I think Darryl Ray might be 6'3", 6'4", but that was very strange. And I remember him coming out of junior and big guy and, had a career, not a star, not a Corey Perry career. Didn't go on for decades, but a good goaltender, then turned and got the opportunity to do this in Dallas and did a great job and still does a great job. And is a voice that when you turn your TV on, you know who it is right away. And a good sense of humor, done a great job, well-deserved to be getting the Foster Hewitt Award.
And has there ever been, maybe outside of Mike Emmerich, Hall of Fame broadcaster himself, that had a better vocabulary?
No, that's right. And just a fun guy. And I love it when these guys stay long-term doing it. I mean, because you end up, the fans associate that voice with their team. And I know this year, Jack Michaels got taken off of the Edmonton broadcast because it went to the national broadcasters in, I think, CBC or whatever in Edmonton. And there was outrage from the Edmonton Oilers fans. They wanted to hear Jack Michaels. They didn't want to hear the national guy. They wanted to hear it said by their guy. And that's how fans are. They get attached to their guy.
And that's why a lot of them aren't happy when the networks take over after we get outside the initial rounds of the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. And it's going to be different for Ranger fans. We had Sam Rosen on the podcast talking about his retirement. Kenny Albert will take over for him, which is a great replacement because Kenny Albert has been around the Rangers his entire life. And so that'll be a smooth transition. But you know, when you hear Sam's voice, you think Rangers right away. You could be in a dark room, pitch black. You hear that voice, Rangers. And Joe Micheletti, of course, his longtime partner, color analyst, he's retiring as well from the Rangers. So we'll see who ends up becoming the color commentator on the TV side with Kenny Albert. The rumor is Dave Maloney, because that was his broadcast partner when he would do the games on radio. Dave Maloney, of course, the captain at one time of the New York Rangers, and it was at a time when the Islanders were in their dynasty that Dave Maloney was the captain Rangers. So we'll see if he ends up getting that assignment, and his brother, the president of the Calgary Flames, Don Maloney, I'm sure will be looking on.
I have one more thing before we let this drop, because with the Hall of Fame nominees, or actually the recipients in Ray and Gagnon in the broadcast and journalistic areas, it's my turn to get on my soapbox and put my word in for you. Mike Gardner and crew, pay attention. This man deserves to be in the Hall. 2 Calder Cup wins with Adirondack, and of course, did something nobody else has been able to do in 85 years, and that's lead the Rangers or build the Rangers to a Stanley Cup champion. So there.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to send you the check as soon as we finish the podcast.
I'll be looking forward to it.
Earlier, I mentioned that Sasha Barkov, the captain of the Florida Panthers, had only been on the ice for 4 regular strength goals against since the beginning of the 24 playoffs until now. Just 4. Well, guess what? They announced today that Sasha Barkov has won his 2nd straight and 3rd career Selke Trophy, as voted by the Professional Hockey Writers Association. And so he beats out his teammate Sam Reinhart and Tampa Bay Lightning center Anthony Cirelli, who are the other 2 nominees. So there you go. Sasha Barkov again. I can't argue with that pick.
Absolutely not. Nobody more well-deserving than Barkov. This is the human side of the story. And as a former GM, Neil, we have walked through this entire season kind of looking at various stages in the calendar of where a GM is at. And we talked about the draft. We talked about free agency. We talked about the start of the season and watching your club develop. We've talked about the trade deadline. But once the playoffs are over, and particularly for the runner-ups in the respective conferences, it's a sense that you're close, but you're not good enough to get to that next level, no less win the Stanley Cup. And we've talked during the course of the last round about the different looks of the Carolina Hurricanes and the Dallas Stars. And in Carolina, it's a club that is extremely well coached by Rod Brindamore, but they never quite seem to be able to have the personnel to elevate to that next level. They play a very consistent style, but they just don't get there in the end. And I think it's more because of their personnel. And on the Dallas side, Jim Nill did a terrific job building what he thought was a championship caliber team. They are also well coached by Peter DeBoer, but DeBoer has also lost his last 5 conference finals. So as these teams head into their off seasons, very different approaches that the GMs have to take here.
Yeah, and I think that the two different GMs totally on these two different teams. Jim Nill is a architect. He's a GM. He's a guy that's built this team, done a fabulous job of building it, and is very loyal to Peter DeBoer and to his staff there. I think he made some marvelous trades. Certainly getting Rantanen was amazing. Good on him to strike early and get Michael Granlund and Cody Ceci out of San Jose. And the team looked like it could be headed for really big things. But when it came time to play the big fish in Edmonton, they just couldn't get it done. On the other side, Eric Tulsky, I don't know. His title is GM. I don't know what he is, to be honest with you. I do know that Tom Dundon, the owner, is very involved in day-to-day player personnel and trying to make moves and calling the whoever the GM is, whether it was Don Waddell or now it's Eric Tulsky. Certainly Eric Tulsky doesn't have the background you'd think you would want to be GM in the NHL if you're autonomous and you're making your own moves, which tells me he's not. It's mostly being dictated by Tom Dundon. That's not the case in Dallas. So in Dallas, I would think Jim Nill would sit down with Peter DeBoer, get his thoughts, get the thoughts of all the different players on their exit meetings, and then try to start to implement a plan to upgrade in the areas that they needed upgrading. Some of the upgrades for Dallas is going to come by maturation. Wyatt Johnston is going to be a really good player. No doubt about it. He didn't have a great playoff, but he will be a great player and will end up having great playoffs. There are others too you can go through on that. Rantanen, it was his first half season with Dallas. Maybe when he's more comfortable, he can be even better next year for them, and so on. But he'll know what pieces he wants to add. On the Carolina side, I think Rod Brindamore had that team overachieve all season long. I think he coached them and got them overachieving. But when they finally got to that point where they had to overachieve against Florida, they couldn't do it. They couldn't overachieve against Florida, and they went down. And so that's a whole different thing. There's a lot of pieces that need to be put in place if you think you're going to beat and get into the final next year. I think that's really different. It's going to take more than just great coaching by Rod Brindamore to get you into the final. So I think they're very different teams. I think that Jim Nill has, as I said, has done a remarkable job as the GM of Dallas.
One of the problems that I think we see in Carolina that we didn't see in Dallas because they were able to acquire and then sign Rantanen long-term is Carolina's ability to hold on to individuals that they have acquired via trade. And we talked about Jake Gensel a year ago. We talk about Rantanen now. And I remember working the 2002 Stanley Cup Final. It's one of 17 that I've worked. And that Raleigh area was one of the true underrated areas to work a final in. And you have to wonder what it's going to take for Tulsky, Dundon, who's ever making the call there, to be able to attract unrestricted free agents to come and stay there long term and become part of the fabric of the Hurricanes as they try to grow forward and take that final step and perhaps make the final and even win it.
The way that Rod Brindamore and Ron Francis did during their times in Carolina, that they became part of the fabric of Raleigh area. And I would think Sebastian Aho has done the same thing there. And there'll be others as Seth Jarvis. Brent Burns has been there for quite a while now. But, Vic, players understand what's going on with the organization. And they understand if the organization's really got a chance to win or not, because they're talking all day long to the trainers, to other auxiliary people, and so on and so forth. If they're hearing the wrong stories come out, they know their chances are limited of winning because it's not the way winning organizations operate. And so when you see those exoduses by the Carolina team last summer, you got to wonder, if these guys thought they had a chance to win, would they be running for the door to go to another team? You don't see that everywhere, but you do see it some places where you think, like, why would everybody leave? They made it to the semifinal. Why wouldn't you want to stay and try to win the cup? Well, if you know the inner workings of the organization, you don't think they really do have a chance, then you're going to go somewhere else.
That is probably the one team that I'm going to be paying more attention to than perhaps any of the other 32 during this offseason is how do they augment? Can they get that big fish in there long term?
Yeah, and that's right. And the Rantanen thing is a blow to them. And the reason I'm saying that is because Mikko Rantanen was there and said, I'm not signing here. Well, what does that tell other players around the league that are thinking about going there? That why did he leave? I mean, they were going to give him the money and he left. So he got traded. But I mean, he told them, I'm not going to sign here. So we'll see what happens with Carolina. I can't forget that Rod Brindamore admitted after being eliminated that when he first saw the roster, he didn't think they were going to make the playoffs. What does that tell you? So we'll see what happens with these two teams. It's two totally different organizations.
And perhaps there is a player out there, a big name, that will find the Carolina lifestyle more to their liking than Mikko Rantanen did, who, of course, subsequently was traded to Dallas. That will wrap up our show for today. Thanks to Craig Button from TSN for joining us. Thanks to UBS Financial Services, Inc. NHL Wraparound and UBS Financial Services, Inc. are not affiliated. UBS is a sponsor of 3 things you need to pay attention to. No other affiliation, relationship, or endorsement is made, suggested, intended, or should be implied or inferred between UBS and VNS Productions, LLC, or any of the individuals or businesses and or their respective products and services appearing in this program.
As we always do, we want to say thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Send questions or comments to nhlwraparound@gmail.com or reach out to me, Neil, at nhlwraparound.com or to Vic at nhlwraparound.com. All of our podcasts are on all platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Spotify. I mentioned that they're all visually on YouTube, and our complete catalog can be found on our website, which, surprise, surprise, is nhlwraparound.com. So subscribe, like us, checkmark us, do whatever you got to do to get us some more likes on there. And remember to watch a lot of our shorter clips, which you can find on X, and that handle is at NHL Wraparound. Stanley Cup dates come back again after Game 1 on Thursday and after Game 2 on Saturday, where we'll give you a breakdown of what's gone on in those games.
And our next NHL Wraparound will be after Game 3. That will be on Tuesday, June 10th. And our special guest, nobody knows history more than this gentleman. He is the hockey maven, Stan Fischler, and we will look forward to having him join us a week from Tuesday. So with that, we sign off. Thank you once again for listening, and we'll speak to you again on Thursday on Stanley Cup Day.
Thanks for joining us on the NHL Wraparound Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all the NHL action.